An old lady, well into her 70s, walked into a small but luxurious jewelry store in the heart of the city. She was dressed simply, in a faded floral dress and a worn-out shawl, carrying a small handbag that had seen better days. Her appearance was humble, and her steps were slow but steady. The store was filled with sparkling diamonds, gold necklaces, and expensive watches displayed under bright lights. A young salesperson, dressed in a sharp suit, stood behind the counter, polishing a piece of jewelry. He glanced at the old lady as she entered but quickly looked away, assuming she was just another window shopper who couldn't afford anything in the store. The old lady moved quietly, her eyes scanning the glass cases filled with glittering items. She paused at a section displaying elegant pearl necklaces, her gaze lingering on one particular piece. The pearls were creamy white, perfectly round, and strung together with a delicate gold clasp. It was clear she admired it. She gently tapped on the glass and asked the young salesperson, "Could I see this one, please?" The salesperson hesitated. He looked her up and down, his expression turning slightly dismissive. "That necklace is very expensive," he said, his tone cold and condescending. "Are you sure you want to see it?" The old lady nodded politely, unfazed by his attitude. "Yes, please. I'd like to take a closer look." Reluctantly, the salesperson unlocked the case and took out the necklace. He held it in his hands, not handing it to her, as if afraid she might damage it. "This is a premium piece," he said, his voice dripping with superiority. "It's not something everyone can afford." The old lady smiled softly, her eyes still fixed on the necklace. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice calm and steady. "How much does it cost?" The salesperson smirked, clearly enjoying what he thought was a moment of power. "This necklace costs more than most people make in a year," he said, exaggerating the price slightly to make a point. "It's not for everyone." The old lady didn't react to his rudeness. She simply nodded, thanked him, and turned to leave the store. The salesperson watched her go, shaking his head as if he had just dealt with a nuisance. He placed the necklace back in the case, muttering under his breath about how some people had no sense of their place. What the salesperson didn't know was that the old lady was far from ordinary. She had lived a long life filled with hard work, wisdom, and quiet strength. She had seen and experienced more than most people could imagine. And while she preferred a simple life, she was far from powerless. As she stepped out of the store, the old lady paused for a moment, looking back at the glittering display window. Her expression was calm, but there was a flicker of determination in her eyes. She had been humiliated, but she wasn't angry. Instead, she felt a quiet resolve. She knew what she had to do. Little did the salesperson know, his dismissive attitude had just set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The old lady walked away, her step steady and purposeful, leaving behind a store that would soon learn not to judge a book by its cover. The old lady didn't go far. Just a few blocks away, she entered a small, cozy cafe tucked between two larger buildings. The cafe was warm and inviting, with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries filling the air. She found a quiet corner table and sat down, her hands resting gently on the table. A young waiter approached her with a friendly smile, asking if she'd like to order something. She nodded and requested a cup of tea and a slice of cake. As she waited for her order, the old lady reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, notes, and numbers. She flipped through it slowly, her eyes scanning the contents with a practiced ease. The notebook was a record of her life's work, decades of careful savings, investments, and decisions that had quietly built her a fortune. She was not wealthy in the flashy, showy way that some people were. Instead, her wealth was steady, solid, and entirely her own. The waiter returned with her tea and cake, placing them gently in front of her. She thanked him with a warm smile and took a sip of the tea, savoring its warmth. As she ate, her mind wandered back to the jewelry store. The salesperson's dismissive attitude hadn't upset her as much as it had disappointed her. She had seen that kind of behavior before, people judging others based on appearances, assuming they knew someone's worth at a glance. It was a lesson she had learned long ago: true value isn't always visible on the surface. Finishing her tea, the old lady closed her notebook and placed it back in her bag. She paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for the kind waiter, and stepped back out into the city. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the streets. She walked with purpose, her mind made up. She returned to the jewelry store, but this time, she didn't go inside. Instead, she stood across the street, observing the storefront. The lights inside were bright, and she could see the same young salesperson helping a well-dressed couple. He was all smiles now, his earlier arrogance replaced with a polished charm. The old lady watched for a few minutes, her expression thoughtful. Then she turned and walked away, her step steady and unhurried. The next morning, the old lady arrived at a small office building in a quieter part of the city. She entered and took the elevator to the third floor, where a law firm was located. The receptionist greeted her by name, clearly familiar with her. "Good morning," the old lady said with a smile. "Is he available?" The receptionist nodded and led her to a spacious office where a middle-aged man in a suit stood up to greet her. "It's always a pleasure to see you," he said warmly. "What can I do for you today?" The old lady sat down and placed her handbag on the table. "I'd like to make an offer," she said calmly. "There's a jewelry store I'm interested in purchasing." The man raised an eyebrow, surprised but not shocked. He had worked with the old lady for years and knew better than to underestimate her. "Which store?" he asked, pulling out a notepad. She told him the name and location, her voice steady and confident. The man nodded, already making notes. "I'll get started right away," he said. "I'll contact the owner and see what we can do." The old lady smiled. "Thank you," she said. "I'll leave it in your capable hands." As she left the office, she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The wheels were now in motion, and soon, the jewelry store would learn a valuable lesson about humility and respect. The lawyer wasted no time. By the end of the day, he had contacted the owner of the jewelry store, a middle-aged man who had inherited the business from his father. The owner was surprised to receive an offer to buy the store, especially from someone he had never met. The lawyer explained that his client was a private individual who admired the store's reputation and wanted to invest in it. The owner, who had been struggling with declining sales and rising costs, was intrigued. He agreed to a meeting the next day. The old lady arrived at the lawyer's office early, dressed in the same simple clothes she always wore. She carried her small handbag and wore the same calm expression. The lawyer briefed her on the store's financial situation, explaining that the owner was eager to sell but would likely try to negotiate a higher price. The old lady listened carefully, nodding occasionally. "Let's see what he has to say," she said softly. When the store owner arrived, he was visibly nervous. He had expected to meet a wealthy businessman or a flashy investor, not an elderly woman in a faded dress. He hesitated for a moment before shaking her hand and sitting down. The lawyer began the meeting, outlining the offer and the terms. The owner listened, his eyes darting between the lawyer and the old lady. When it was his turn to speak, the owner tried to justify a higher price, talking about the store's history, its loyal customers, and its potential for growth. The old lady listened patiently, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When he finished, she spoke for the first time. "I understand the value of your store," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I also know its challenges. My offer is fair." The owner hesitated, unsure how to respond. He had expected a tough negotiator, not someone who spoke with such quiet authority. He glanced at the lawyer, who gave him a subtle nod, as if to say, "Take the deal." After a long pause, the owner sighed and agreed to the terms. The old lady smiled and extended her hand. "Thank you," she said. "I look forward to working with you during the transition." As the owner left the office, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a deal with someone far more powerful than she appeared. The old lady, meanwhile, sat back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. The store was now hers, and the next chapter of her plan was about to begin. The news of the store's sale spread quickly among the staff. The young salesperson who had humiliated the old lady was shocked, and the owner announced that the business had been sold. "The new owner will be visiting soon," the former owner said, his tone a mix of relief and curiosity. "Make sure everything is in order." The staff buzzed with speculation. Who was the new owner? Would there be changes? The young salesperson, still arrogant and dismissive, brushed off the concerns. "It's probably some rich investor who doesn't know anything about jewelry," he said with a smirk. "We'll be fine." A few days later, the old lady arrived at the store. She walked in quietly, just as she had before, but this time, she carried herself with a quiet confidence. The staff didn't recognize her at first, too busy with their tasks to notice the elderly woman in the simple dress. The young salesperson, however, spotted her immediately. His eyes narrowed as he remembered their previous encounter. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone cold and unwelcoming. The old lady smiled. "Yes, you can," she said. "I'm here to see how things are running." The salesperson frowned, confused. Before he could respond, the former owner stepped forward, his face lighting up with recognition. "Welcome," he said warmly. "Everyone, this is the new owner." The staff froze, their eyes widening in shock. The young salesperson's face turned pale, his earlier arrogance replaced with stunned silence. The old lady looked around the room, her gaze calm but piercing. "Thank you," she said to the former owner. Then she turned to the staff. "I'd like to speak with everyone, please." The staff gathered nervously, their eyes fixed on the old lady. She stood before them, her presence commanding respect despite her humble appearance. "I've admired this store for a long time," she began. "But I also know it can be better. My goal is to create a place where everyone feels welcome, regardless of how they look or what they wear." Her words were simple but powerful. The staff listened intently, some nodding in agreement. The young salesperson, however, shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence crumbling. After the meeting, the old lady asked to speak with him privately. He followed her to a quiet corner, his heart pounding. "I remember you," she said, her tone calm but firm. "And I remember how you treated me. But this isn't about revenge. It's about learning. I hope you'll take this as an opportunity to grow." The salesperson nodded, too ashamed to speak. The old lady smiled gently. "Now, let's get to work." The old lady wasted no time in making changes to the store. She started by meeting with each staff member individually, listening to their ideas and concerns. She wanted to understand the store from the inside out, and her calm, attentive demeanor put everyone at ease, except for the young salesperson, who still felt a lingering sense of guilt. She introduced new policies, focusing on respect and kindness. "Every customer deserves to be treated with dignity," she said during a staff meeting. "No matter who they are or how they look, they should feel valued when they walk through our doors." The staff nodded, inspired by her words. Even the young salesperson began to see things differently, though he still struggled with his pride. The old lady also made practical changes. She updated the store's inventory, adding more affordable options alongside the high-end pieces. "Luxury shouldn't be exclusive," she explained. "Everyone should have the chance to own something beautiful." She also improved the staff's working conditions, offering better pay and benefits. The employees were grateful, and their morale soared. Word of the changes spread quickly, and soon the store began to attract a more diverse crowd. Wealthy customers still came for the expensive jewelry, but now they were joined by young couples, students, and even children saving up for small gifts. The store felt alive in a way it never had before. The young salesperson, however, was still finding his place. He tried to follow the old lady's example, but old habits were hard to break. One day, a teenager walked into the store, dressed in casual clothes and carrying a backpack. The salesperson hesitated, his instinct to judge kicking in. But then he remembered the old lady's words and approached the teenager with a smile. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone genuine. The teenager looked surprised but nodded. "I'm looking for a gift for my mom," he said shyly. "It's her birthday, and I've been saving up." The salesperson listened carefully, showing the teenager a few affordable options. When the teenager found a simple but elegant bracelet within his budget, the salesperson felt a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in a long time. The old lady watched from a distance, a small smile on her face. She didn't say anything, but her presence was enough to remind him of the lesson she had taught. As the days went by, the store continued to thrive, and the young salesperson began to change. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that, the old lady knew, was what mattered most. The store's transformation didn't go unnoticed. Customers began sharing their positive experiences online, praising the welcoming atmosphere and the staff's kindness. The old lady's vision was coming to life, and the store was becoming a beloved part of the community. One afternoon, a local news reporter visited the store, curious about the changes. She approached the old lady, who was arranging a display of delicate silver rings. "Excuse me," the reporter said, "I've heard so much about this place. Would you mind answering a few questions?" The old lady smiled and nodded. "Of course," she said. The reporter asked about the store's new direction and the inspiration behind it. The old lady answered honestly, her words simple but heartfelt. "I believe everyone deserves to feel valued," she said. "This store isn't just about selling jewelry. It's about creating moments of joy and connection." The reporter was impressed. "And what about the staff?" she asked. "I've heard they've undergone quite a transformation too." The old lady glanced at the young salesperson, who was helping a customer with a warm smile. "People can change," she said softly. "Sometimes, they just need a chance to see things differently." The interview was published the next day, and the story quickly gained attention. People admired the old lady's wisdom and kindness, and many were inspired by her approach to business. The store became busier than ever, with customers coming not just to buy jewelry but to experience the atmosphere for themselves. The young salesperson, now a changed man, found himself enjoying his work in a way he never had before. He no longer judged customers by their appearance or assumed he knew their worth. Instead, he focused on making them feel welcome, just as the old lady had taught him. One evening, as the store was closing, he approached the old lady. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked, his voice hesitant. She nodded and sat down with him. "What's on your mind?" she asked gently. He took a deep breath. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "You've taught me so much, not just about work but about life. I'm sorry for how I treated you before. I was wrong, and I'm grateful for the chance to do better." The old lady smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "We all make mistakes," she said. "What matters is what we do after. I'm proud of the person you're becoming." Her words touched him deeply, and he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. As they locked up the store that night, the young salesperson felt a renewed sense of purpose. The old lady's kindness had changed not just the store but him as well. The store's success continued to grow, but the old lady remained humble and grounded. She often spent her days talking to customers, listening to their stories, and offering advice when asked. Her presence became a source of comfort for many, and people began to see her not just as a store owner but as a wise and caring figure in the community. One day, a young woman walked into the store, her eyes red from crying. The old lady noticed her immediately and approached her with a gentle smile. "Is everything all right, dear?" she asked. The young woman shook her head. "I just lost my job," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to buy something special for my mom's birthday, but now I can't afford anything." The old lady listened patiently, her heart going out to the young woman. "Come with me," she said, leading her to a display of modestly priced jewelry. Sometimes, the most meaningful gifts don't have to be expensive. It's the thought that counts. The young woman's eyes lit up as she picked out a simple but elegant pendant. "This is perfect," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much." The old lady smiled. "You're welcome, dear. And don't lose hope. Things will get better." The young woman left the store with a smile on her face, her spirits lifted by the old lady's kindness. It was moments like these that made the store special, not the glittering jewelry, but the connections it fostered. Meanwhile, the young salesperson continued to grow under the old lady's guidance. He took on more responsibilities, helping to train new staff and manage the store's day-to-day operations. His transformation was evident to everyone, and he became a role model for his colleagues. One evening, as the store was closing, the old lady called him over. "I've been thinking," she said. "I'm not getting any younger, and this store needs someone to lead it into the future. I'd like that person to be you." The young salesperson was stunned. "Me?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. The old lady nodded. "You've come a long way, and I believe in you. This store is more than just a business, it's a place where people can feel valued. I know you'll take good care of it." Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized the trust she was placing in him. "I won't let you down," he said, his voice firm with determination. The old lady smiled, her heart full. She knew the store was in good hands. The transition was smooth. The young salesperson, now the store's manager, took his new role seriously. He worked tirelessly to uphold the values the old lady had instilled, ensuring that every customer felt welcome and valued. The store continued to thrive, becoming a symbol of kindness and community in the city. The old lady still visited the store often, though she no longer handled the day-to-day operations. She enjoyed watching the staff interact with customers, her heart swelling with pride at how far they had come. Her presence was a constant reminder of the store's mission, and her wisdom continued to guide everyone who worked there. One day, as she sat in her usual corner, sipping tea and observing the bustling store, a familiar face walked in. It was the young woman who had lost her job months ago. She looked happier now, her eyes bright and confident. She approached the old lady with a smile. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "Your kindness that day meant so much to me. I found a new job, and things are going really well. I even bought my mom another gift, this time, to celebrate her recovery from an illness." The old lady smiled warmly. "I'm so happy to hear that," she said. "You've been through a lot, and you've come out stronger. That's something to be proud of." The young woman nodded, her gratitude evident. "This store feels like a second home to me," she said. "It's not just the jewelry, it's the way everyone here makes you feel." The old lady's eyes twinkled. "That's exactly what I hoped for," she said. As the years went by, the store's legacy grew. It became a place where people came not just to buy jewelry but to find comfort, inspiration, and connection. The young manager, now a confident and compassionate leader, ensured that the old lady's vision lived on. The old lady, content with what she had built, spent her days surrounded by the love and respect of the community she had touched. She knew that her work was done, and she had no regrets. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the city, the old lady sat in her favorite chair, looking out at the store she had transformed. She smiled softly, her heart at peace. She had turned a moment of humiliation into something beautiful, a place where kindness and respect shone brighter than any diamond. And so, the story of the old lady and the jewelry store became a legend, a reminder that true value lies not in wealth or appearances but in the way we treat one another.